Hey team, welcome back to Rospec. I've seen a lot of people welding diffs or putting in mini spools, but what if I told you there was a better way that is the same amount of effort as putting in a mini spool and only marginally more expensive? And better than that, I'm going to test it on the track. Come on, let's get into it.
For those who haven't been following along, I have Robin, a 1997 Ford Falcon fitted with a NA Barra that I've been using for time attack racing. Being an ex-drift car, she has a locked rear diff, achieved here using a mini spool. If your car is still used on the street, this comes with several drawbacks, but the main issues I have is turnability and inside wheel chirp, the latter of which will get you a nice little defect notice if the local law enforcement notices. If you don't already have one, a mini spool for something like Robin will set you back 60 to 80 bucks. But for a little bit more, well, $240 more, I've gone with something that not only would be better for my application, get rid of my issues, and be around the same effort to install. So today we're going to install a Torque Lock Center or a helical gear driven LSD. And to keep the cost down, we're going to be reusing the rest of the old internals, gears, bearings and all. To make sure I had a diff that worked if we stuffed up the install, I went to my pile of shame and pulled out an AU XR6 diff. I'd originally bought this one to just chuck in, but still hadn't because, while every series of XR6 before it came with a limited slip diff, this one being from an AU Series 3, the LSD was an option, and the original owner didn't tick the box. I didn't want to be doing any single spinners. Another advantage of using this diff is that it comes with 345 diff gears, and I'm currently running on 3.08, which is the typical standard affair for the auto versions of non-Tickford cars. After carrying the diff out from the pile of shame, we put it on stands to make working on it easier. Remove the brake discs and drain the oil. Remove the brake dust shields. Unfortunately, the guy who delivered the diff strapped it down on them and bent them all up. I was hoping that the ones from the diff in the car had the same bolt pattern, but that turned out not to be the case. Undid the axle retaining bolts and using an old disc and a knockometer removed the axle. I didn't mind pounding on the disc as it was going straight in the bin, but if you're going to reuse the disc, you'd be better off using a slide hammer to get the axle free. Took the rear cover off. There is two dowels that align the rear cover. We pried up one side too quickly and the other side bound up, but with a slight tap back down, the cover came off with ease. It is important that everything goes back in the same place, so we marked the bearing caps to show left and right. Then undid the bearing cap bolts. After getting them out, we levered the center out, ensuring to keep the bearing caps and the shims with their corresponding side. Once on the bench, we double checked that the Torque Lock Center was the same height and had the correct splines. Confirming that, we could remove the ring gear from the center, noting that these bolts are left-hand thread. Up until this point, everything that we've done here you would need to do to install a mini spool. But for the spool, from here you'd have to split the original center to remove the planetary gears and replace them with the spool. Instead, with the gear out of the way, we used a two-legged puller to remove the bearing from the center. The original center has a cutout so that the puller can almost go fully underneath. This is the point where we had to be most careful. If we damaged the bearing, it wasn't going to be a simple swap. The other side fought us a bit, but with a bit of a shock from the impact gun, it slid off perfectly. Again, we paid a lot of attention to where everything came from to make sure everything went back in exactly the same place. Successfully stripping the bearings off the center, we started with the reassembly. Oiled up all the mating surfaces and installed the ring gear, tightening it down in an alternating side pattern to help ensure that the gear comes up square. Then, after more oiling of the surfaces, knocked on the old bearings back onto their corresponding side. First using a flat plate from the puller kit until the bearing was flush with the end of the center, and then all the way home using a bush from my hydraulic press kit, but a big socket could have finished off the job too. After cleaning all the surfaces, we put the center and spacers back in. Note, it does go in easier if you align it the right way.
Is that the right way?
Using a soft hammer, we tapped it back into the housing, ensuring that the spacers came along for the ride. Once all the way in, we reinstalled the bearing caps and torqued everything back up. With the center back in, we could install the axles and torque them back down, again in an alternating side pattern. After laying down some Ultra Grey, we could sit on the rear cover and bolt it all down. Now the diff is ready to go back in. But before I start pulling the back apart, I took a couple of measurements to determine where the back is sitting. Since the rear end is going to be totally disassembled, I'm going to add some may as well bits at the same time. and in the end I've thrown a heap of bits into the front, but pretty much run with stock bits at the rear. Time to add a bit of adjustability. I feel like I've pulled the rear apart a million times. The procedure is simple. Jack the car up and put it on some stands. Remove the wheels, remove the brake calipers and put them off to the side. I'm not changing anything there. I finally get to remove these spacers. The AU diff is wider than the EL one, so the wheels will bolt straight up. Then I can get off the brake disc, remove the Watts link, sway bar, and slide under to undo the tail shaft. Undo the shocks, and before we go too far, remove the dust shields so we didn't get them all bent up like old mate did. From there, we lowered the diff onto a go jack so we could easily slide it out, and after undoing the upper and lower control arms, roll it out of the way. After wheeling in the upgraded diff on the go jack, we attached the upper and lower control arm so we could lift the diff and put it on stands. Now the old boy, you gotta love him, and he's a massive help, but he loves just diving in. So I didn't capture what we changed here on the handbrake to go from an E-Series to an AU diff, but essentially the handbrake cables are different. The E-Series has a pivot arm where the AU does away with this to have a pressed steel metal splitter, so we couldn't just swap the cables over. While this doesn't make a difference in operation, it did affect our attachment. The EL has a metal bracket stuck on the end of the cable where the AU has nothing, so I ended up slitting the EL bracket just enough to feed the cable out and slide it onto the end of the AU cable. Works perfectly, just isn't pretty. And the dust shield from the EL diff didn't fit onto the AE either. When I originally installed these brakes on the rear, I tried to use the dust shields off an FG Ute. They didn't fit then, but luckily they're still lying around because they fit now. Then we could put in the sway bar and the Watts link. Rather than put the old springs and shock back in, I've decided to go with a set of HSD coilovers to match the front. The last couple of track days I've struggled with the rear end and I've had no adjustability in the old stuff. So this should be a nice little upgrade, but my simple mind when looking at the top bracket that they came with made no sense to me. After a bit of research, I realised that this top bracket isn't used for this application. Why they send them out with them on, I don't know. But I'll just whip that off and then I should be ready to go. Now with that top bracket off, we could finally install the shock and hook it up to the diff. Now we could put the brakes, tail shaft and wheels back on, fill it with oil and drop it on the ground. After a quick measurement, I need to take another 25mm out of the height, but that's not going to stop me from going for a drive. Already instantly better. No chirping inside wheel when I'm driving it out. Usually when installing these rear coilovers, I recommend trimming the metal where the old spring sat so the new springs have more room to move. At some stage I might convert it back to standard springs, so I didn't want to do that. You can hear the springs flicking over the old spring seat every now and again. It'd be annoying on a street car, but as Robin is track only, I'm not that concerned. But running around in the car park doesn't tell you much, so now it's time to test it on the track. Unfortunately the weather didn't really help out, but I did get a fancy pit bay. In some ways the weather was a bit of a blessing. Under similar conditions with the mini spool, the car spun out from underneath me while driving slowly on the warm-up lap. And came unstuck at speed when I put down power slightly too early. So I gave it a couple of test pokes, first into the dipper to see if it would break free, but it was quite settled. Then tried what power the track could take, which wasn't much because the wheels would spin in a straight line. On the first lap I went carefully into turn 1, mostly because last time I was on track I was actually sitting parked in a car in a tyre barrier, so I thought easy would do it, but turning was nice, so nice that I thought I'd give it a bit more. I wanted to try and get out of the way because the Clio was catching me fast, but I had a massive slide out of turn 4. I thought it best to stay off the gas and let him through. From there, it was just feeling the car out. The new center was magic. It wasn't making any unwanted noises, and the diff wasn't causing the back to slide out every time I tried to turn a corner. The conditions were horrible though. At one point, I had the front wheel lock and start to pull the car to the left off the track. I was lucky to have enough time to release it and still pull it up before the corner. And there was oversteer everywhere with power down coming onto the straights. But as the day went on, the conditions got better. Now I have a Dragy and there is a companion app, Dragy Laps, that detects where you are and will automatically log lap times for you. I'm a bit disappointed that it isn't called Lappy, but I guess that naming it might have the wrong kind of downloads. For the second session, the track wasn't dry, but it wasn't fully wet either. After the first lap, 4 of us ended up tripping over each other. So the Lotus decided to slow down and try and make some room for himself, allowing me to slip through. Coming out on the straight, I could see the BMW was quick in a straight line. At the end of that lap, the XR8 let him through, and I tried to tuck onto his bumper, but he blew me away again. Once we were out of 4, the BMW let me through, but the Lotus was right on my 6 again. I was trying to get out of the final turn smoothly and let him back through, but had a massive oversteer moment. Bit awkward, but he still got past me, no worries, and better than that, that was my quickest lap of the day up until that point. Not to rest there, I pushed on with the rest of the lap, and went quicker again. For the third and final session, I had a nice gap, and could just pull laps, and went quicker, and quicker. Then on the third lap, I did a lazy downshift from 4th to 5th. The shift on Robin is sloppy as. I'm guessing the nylon bush on the T5 is completely gone. I'm going to have to look at that when I get a chance. But with a quick third gear selection, I still went quicker again. Quick enough to set a new PB. But could I go quicker again? I'll overlay some Dragy info here, and I have to retcon some of my previous information. When I put on the new under tray, I stated that I gained 9 km an hour. If you were paying attention, I just hit 176 km an hour before braking into 1. When I put the PowerTune digital dash in, I opted for the GPS upgrade and thought I was getting speed from there. Turns out I'm getting speed from the ECU and must have come out of an XR6 because the dash is reading the same as the GPS speed now from the Dragy. But with some quick math, the old top speeds were 158 km an hour up to 168, so I actually gained 10 km an hour. And better than that, after slipping behind at the start of the lap, by the end I was still quicker again. So in the end I pulled a 104.6, almost 1 second quicker than my previous PB on this layer. And when you consider that the tyres and brakes are still the ones that I used to set the old PB at the end of last year, the upgrades worked. So for only a few dollars more and for about the same amount of effort, we have a better functioning diff. And yeah, not all the time saved would be due to the Torque Lock Diff Center. The shorter diff gears and the coilovers would be greatly assisting along the way. But the car is so much more comfortable to drive now. I'm kicking myself that I hadn't done it sooner. I think now I need to get some new rubber and have a real crack at it. If you want to see how she goes, don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time, remember, there's more to going fast than going fast. Catch you later.